What's going on, Restoration Nation? Rico Garcia here. Today I got a really exciting episode. We are joined by none other than Andy McCabe, the claims delegate. For those of you in the business that are active in Facebook and on LinkedIn, maybe you're familiar with the Restoration Rebels group. He's very, very active there. But more importantly, Andy is really one of these guys in our industry that is advocating hard to make sure that you get paid exactly what it is that you're worth. So how is it that you do that? He shares all of his tips and tricks on this particular episode, the importance of, documentation, how to document, the difference between an estimate and an invoice, right? And just making sure that you're doing everything that you can as a restoration pro to get paid exactly what it is that you're worth. So we had tons of fun on this episode. Andy is a very, very passionate guy for those of you that are familiar with Andy, and that's exactly what the industry needs. Is we need that degree of passion, and we also need to go ahead and draw a line in the sand, and that's something that Andy helps us do. So tons of fun on this particular episode. Make sure that you grab a pen and a sheet of paper. I think you're going to go ahead and take away some notes. Before we jump into the episode, I want to go ahead and thank our show sponsors. First and foremost, CNR Magazine. If you don't have your subscription to CNR Magazine yet, head on over to cnrmagazine.com and hit the subscribe button. Get your subscription. Tons of great articles, great columns, great industry news. Keep your finger on the pulse of the market. Also want to give a big shout out to Restoration Referral System. Head on over to restorationreferralsystem.com/dominate. If you want to go ahead and tap into the insurance agent market and have that be a powerhouse of referrals for your business, head on over to restorationreferralsystem.com/dominate. We've got a very special offer for you there. And of course, Company Cam, our show sponsors. Love the app. More on them a little bit later. Meanwhile, let's jump into the show.
Owning any type of restoration business is demanding of your time, your energy, and resources. And that's why we're here. This is Restoration Domination. If you're a contractor in water mitigation, mold remediation, biohazard cleanup, roofers, or public adjusters, you'll learn how to dominate using some of the techniques and strategies that our guests will share. We'll interview top industry insiders, movers and shakers, hustlers and hackers, and anyone dominating their industry. This is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, and dominate. And here's your host, Rico Garcia.
All right. Andy, what is going on, man? Thank you so much for jumping on the show today. Are you ready to help us dominate?
I think so.
Let's do it, man. So fill in some of the gaps on the intro. Let the audience know exactly who you are, what you do, and what you're doing for the industry.
Sure. Andy McCabe. I've been in restoration since 2000, 1999, 2000 or so. Took my first job in this crazy world that we live in as a marketing guy for a restoration company in Portland, Oregon. So I was a stop and drop, candy drop. I was the guy that showed up at every insurance agent's office in the Portland metro area every 3 months. And I was dropping candy, donuts, calendars, tchotchkes, the drill. Then I worked into restoration. They wanted to turn me into an estimator, project manager, but before they could do that, I had to be trained. I had to know what I was doing. So their company policy was you can't estimate something until you've done it. So I went and got my water damage certs, my mold certs, and all that stuff. And I was a water tech for a year. So that's where I really cut my teeth and understood, what it takes to deliver in this industry, in this crazy world, and really got to know the heart and soul of what makes this restoration industry so great. It's the people that are willing to get out of bed in the middle of the night and go get it done, go get dirty, go sacrifice themselves on behalf of the insured and the clients. And that's where I like getting on my white horse and going to the rescue. And I think that a lot of us have that integral to us. We want to be the hero. We want to go do good work. And then, so from there, project management, and then estimating, and then, 100 different ways from Sunday. I was doing a lot of stuff. Ended up as a regional manager for a large player who just got bought. They just got bought by Blue Sky, I believe. And it's been a long road. It's been 20 years. But now most of all I do is write estimates for contractors. I got really good at Xactimate, so I decided in 2012 to break out on my own and say, I will offer my expertise as an Xactimate dude to the highest bidder. Actually, not highest bidder, the lowest bidder, as it turns out sometimes. And so that's what I do. Now I got a small army of folks right now that write sheets for me. We're just now breaking into Symbility, which is a crazy, crazy whole world. Yeah, that's a different animal. I've got an opinion or three about Symbility, but along the road, I wrote a book, I started a podcast, I did a whole bunch of things just trying to get my name out there. And now I just, if you look at my LinkedIn feed at all, I just bitch and moan. That's what I do for a living.
Well, that was one thing that I was going to say is you are very, very vocal about getting contractors paid, right? Making sure that invoices get paid, which again, that's a conversation that we need to have, right? Which is one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is because number one, how vocal you are, but also your overall theory about how to go about it properly, right?
Sure.
We were talking off camera about the importance of finding ways to get your invoices paid, get them paid fast, get them paid in full, but get them paid in an ethical manner, right? So talk to me about what that looks like. And let's take a step back. Before you talk about what it should look like, let's talk about what the majority of the stuff that's being thrown against the wall actually is, and why people are so upset that they're not getting paid. So can we tear down all of the mistakes? Let's get all of that shit out of the way first, and then we'll talk about what a nice, pretty invoice and process should look like in order for these people to get paid.
Well, let's back up even further. Let's go back to when I was just starting out as an estimator, just starting out as a water damage technician, and writing those invoices back in the day, 2001, 2002, 2003. What everyone in this industry seems to have this selective amnesia about is we put overhead and profit on everything. We put O&P on everything. 2004-ish, 2005-ish, American Family came along and started beating up their program vendors and saying, first they were like, we're not going to give you 10 and 10, we'll give you 10 and 5, or 5 and 10, or whatever it was. And then almost overnight, the entire industry switched because somebody said, well, we don't need the 10 and 10, there's plenty of money in it. And that's on us. That was one of our contractors said that, right? And they set the tone for the next decade, the next 2 decades of claims handling. Now all the carriers think that overhead and profit is only owed what complicated losses, complex losses, administrative things. But so early on, when we all gave that up, right? We all had different relationships with carriers at that time. We had friends who were adjusters. We had relationships, long-term relationships with the adjusters and carriers we were working with. And at the time, we're like, okay, we won't charge O&P, but it was a wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to make it up somewhere else. And that's where this unethical foundation was laid. Is we have, as contractors, we have overhead to cover. We have profit needs. And we're going to make that profit. We're going to cover that overhead one way, shape, or form. And the unfortunate reality is we decided to be deceptive about it. And it was a collusion between us and the adjusters that we were working with is, we can't pay you for the 3 days of drying. Don't even get me started. We don't have enough time to cover that. But if I can't charge for 3 days, I'm going to add some labor here. I'm going to charge for something. And that's the bottom line. I'm charging for something that I'm not doing because I'm not able to charge for something that I'm owed. And at the end of the day, the entire mentality of the industry needs to change to what did I do and what's a proper price for the job that I did? Not how much stuff I can throw at the wall and see how much sticks. And definitely not going, well, if I can't make 20%, right? If I can't do the 20% markup, I'm just going to add 20 or 25% more stuff. And if in too many of us, and there's people all over this industry doing this, too many of us have that mentality of, well, it's just a game. We're going to play the claim game. And this is their rules that they're saying we have to abide by. So we're just going to find these sneaky ass ways to get the money that we know we need. So, that's a long way to say we did it to ourselves. We voluntarily gave up overhead and profit. We voluntarily said, oh, we could do these things. We could dry any structure in 3 days, which is horseshit. No one can dry a structure in 3 days and guarantee it. And that's what you see in hurricanes all the time. You get the program guys come in, the green and yellow trucks come in. They spend 3 days on a job site. They pick up their equipment and go home. But the insured, the homeowner, is left with a wet house that still needs to be dealt with.
Right.
But they justify it because that's what they're going to pay. That's all they're going to pay. So the problems that I see, and I call them out because I know I was there before this was reality. I was there before adjusters felt entitled to reach into my pocketbook as a contractor and take money out of it. This doesn't have to be this way. So that's why I'm so vocal. I know how it can be. It can be honest. It can be 100% above board, and you can make an adequate profit to reinvest in your business and grow. Well, I have all kinds of problems, but anyway, I think I covered that. That's in order to get paid more, we have to first change our mentality and change our entire approach to the claims process. Right. Because we can't, I don't know who said that quote. You can't solve the problems we have today using the thinking that we used to get here. Something like that. We use bad thinking and bad justifications to get us in the mess we're in. Now we've got to unwind it. We've got to unwind it using different thinking, a higher level of thinking to everything we do.
Right. So in the O&P thing is one of those things that basically comes up in every single conversation. And whether you're doing any kind of restoration work, mold remediation, water damage, I mean, again, the locker room talk is, hey, put O&P on there, and if they take it away, they take it away. But it is what it is, right? So, but then the question still remains. Like every business, first of all, is independent, right? You're paying your people differently. They've got different benefit packages. They've got maybe a 401k. Maybe you've got 20 trucks on the road as opposed to 100 trucks on the road, right? Like there's so many different variables, right? That it's very difficult, damn near impossible to take a quote unquote, a national price list, right? Regardless of when it was updated, which by the way, if you look at, and I'm sure you've done this and probably you've dug into this, but if you look at the trends of that particular price list and those particular line items, they're not keeping up with inflation, right? But ultimately, as a business owner, we are the ones that are performing a service and we have a certain overhead. And if I want to, because it's my equipment, and if I want to charge, let's say $150 a day for DHU rental, well, it's well within my American right, I would say, to charge $150 for that equipment, right? Let's just, So now the question then becomes, if I feel entitled to the O&P, which by the way, I'm one of those, I genuinely feel entitled to my O&P, because if we're going to go line item by line item, linear foot by linear foot, brother, like you can get out of business really, really quick, right? So what's the proper way to make that argument for, hey, these are my profits. This is my overhead. This is financially where we need to be in order to be a viable business. Is there an argument today that can be made? And if there is an argument, what's the most elegant argument for that?
Well, I would answer your question with another question. At what point did we reach the point where we have to justify our business to anyone else? I watched an older interview with the president of Exactware yesterday, and he says the right price, and he said it right on video, and I'll find the link and we'll link it up. Right on video, the right price for a service is determined by the buyer and the seller.
Amen.
And we've got it messed up. I don't want to try to justify my costs and my billing practices to anyone except for my client. And the adjuster and the carrier is not my client. Period. End of story. So how do you justify anything to an adjuster? You don't. You're losing before you even start if you're trying to justify. You're talking from a defensive position. So the best defense is a great offense. Go on offense. Recognize who your client is. It's not the adjuster. And the adjuster really isn't paying your bill. The adjuster is indemnifying their insured for the costs they incurred for your services.
Right.
It's a very different thing. There's a mentality of, well, the adjuster's paying my bills. That's where my bread is buttered, so I got to do things their way. But you don't. It's a false dichotomy. It's a false dilemma, and we are buying into it every single day. The key is come up with your pricing. Come up with your pricing that and that's the other problem with Exactware. We've become very, very lazy as an industry. If you go, I go across the street right here in this complex. There's a cabinet guy right here. There's a metal fabrication guy right here. There's a lawn maintenance folks right here. Right? When they got into business, they didn't buy this packaged program with predetermined pricing and try to back their business into that and make it profitable. No, they just said, what do I need for profit? What do I need to charge? And what services can I provide and still maintain that profitability? We've lost that and we've become lazy as an industry because we're just relying too much on other people to tell us what we can charge.
Right. So as far as pricing is concerned, right, there's a lot of debate about, using Xactimate, the need to use Xactimate. And there's also this other camp in the industry now, which is talking about bulk pricing, saying, all right, if you're going to nickel and dime me, this is my price, this is my invoice, figure it out. And it's just basically, again, just bulk invoicing. Can you talk to us a little bit about your opinions, your thoughts on bulk invoicing, maybe where that general thought is coming from? I personally believe that bulk invoicing thought is coming from a place where people are just tired of having to defend their bills. Right. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that depending on the size of your organization, you're sitting there, you're hanging up a process for an invoice because yes, sure, the client is the homeowner or the commercial property owner, they're your client, but the person who's stroking the check is still the insurance company. Right. So now, even though they've got that power, they've got that ability to say, oh, well, I'm not going to stroke a check because I don't agree with this. And then, of course, the next option is, does it end up in litigation? If that ends up in litigation, how long are we going to stroke it? And then all of a sudden, there's, not all money then is good money, right? Because, $1,000 today, as opposed to $1,000 12 months from now, that's not the same $1,000 anymore, right?
No.
So,
you're right.
What's your opinion on bulk pricing? Is that a solution? Or is Xactimate still the preferred tool to submit your estimates in? And really what it boils down to is just a difference in how you are defending, or should I say arguing for, or advocating.
Well, the beauty of Exactware and Xactimate is it's very easy to come to an apples and apples comparison, apples to apples. It allows for these side-by-side comparisons of, is this reasonable? Is this standard? And you can start to develop what are the standards. And even if they're not written down anywhere, we do have some standards we live by. And we guide our industry by those imagined standards or whatnot. But I've got to be very careful because the bulk of my business is writing in Xactimate for contractors. And, I come out and say, you don't need Xactimate. Well, honestly, you don't. But you do if you want to get paid in a timely fashion. And that's what it comes down to. You're exactly right. The good money versus bad money. And, fighting for that $100,000. And if you're still fighting for that same money 12 months from now, you've spent that money. You've already incurred the cost to get the job done. Now you've spent that money again to fight it in administrative costs and time and time value of money and everything else. The Xactware at least gives you a starting point from the negotiations, so you can be 100% upfront. I did a post today on LinkedIn that I was so mad. I get so emotionally involved in these things. This contractor came in and gave this bogus comp bid. and they depreciated the painting 100%. Their comp bid included $0 for painting because they depreciated it. So if it's really a comp bid, I should hire them to come paint this house for nothing because that's what they bid. So exact work gives us at least some place to start fighting from. Now the bulk pricing, I think it more of a flat rate pricing. I've got on my board, I've started tracking. We do a lot of mitigation invoices for folks. So I have my writers write down the total invoice and then our total, and how much. I've got a lot of metrics there, but I break down the total invoice created by the total affected square foot, and I'm trying to find what is that number. If I wanted to go straight square foot pricing as a mitigator, what would that number be? And now right now it's a range between $15 and $30 a foot. Big range. It's a huge range. But I think ultimately you could build the structure of an invoicing for your company and pick a number. Maybe you do, smaller jobs, less square footage is a smaller amount or whatever else. But I see a very viable future where mitigators come in and say, I will dry any house, any structure for $25 a foot. And then you're not arguing about was it dry in 3 days or 4 days or 5 days? How much equipment did you use? How much labor did you? How many times did you go out and how many times did you check it? Did you do moisture mapping? Whatever else. If the flat rate avoids all that, you just commit as a company. Mr. Smith, I'm going to dry this structure for $25 a foot. You've got 1,000 affected square foot. Your bill's going to be 25 grand.
Right.
Period. End of story. You don't give the adjuster or the carrier any of that ammunition to use against you. Because how do you argue with that? You can't, because it's not apples to apples. It's apples and oranges and apples and grapes or whatever else. They're not going to know what to do with it. And my guess is the first folks that go to that flat rate or square footage rate for mitigation, they're going to get paid a whole lot more.
Right.
They're going to get paid quicker. Now,
the question would be, is again, because once you start bringing in this new way of doing things, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now all of a sudden you're speaking to someone on the other end that more than likely has never put down an air mover or DHU, right? So that's issue number one. Yep. Lucky if they have their WRT or any other kind of certification for that matter. But now all of a sudden they're so used to looking at Xactimate or whatever software it is that they're using, and now you're just hitting them with what they are going to perceive to be an astronomical price that isn't broken down any further than just a couple of line items, because at that point you're just doing per square foot, right? So the pushback that would happen there is insane. So then it goes right back to my initial question, which is, how do you not necessarily defend, right? But how do you advocate for, hey, this is what my pricing is, end of story, and do that in a way that doesn't inevitably just make the desk adjuster, the claims examiner, take your file and say, okay, this is the lawsuit file, right? Like, so
that's the appraisal file.
Right. What's your mechanism? Is it solely done based on documentation? Is it done with email templates? Is it done with, some kind of a phone script that people should kind of keep in the back of their mind? I mean, what's typically your process for that?
It's mentality first. It's a mindset first, and then there's mechanics to it. Documentation is, we've known for a long time as professionals, the good ones of us, and I know you, Rico, you're part of that good side. The ultimate documentation does equal faster payment. It really does. If you send a $50,000 invoice over the wire with one picture and no moisture content information at all, you're asking to get beat up. You're asking for that thing to go to appraisal or go SIU.
And that is exactly why I absolutely love our show sponsor, which is Company Cam. More on them later.
Oh, Company Camp. I do like Company Camp.
Company Camp is
They've
amazing,
done-
but I can't give them 4 different shout outs in the same videos.
All right. So we'll hold off.
We'll hold off. But they are an amazing company. As a matter of fact, I recently had Luke on the episode, and he was a tremendous amount of fun. Super cool guy.
Luke Spence.
He's the founder and CEO of Company Camp.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great product. But even that, you send 1,000 photos via Company Cam over the wire with a $50,000 invoice and nothing else, you're still going to get beat up.
Right.
You've got to have a process. I came up with a process called the 24-hour tech years ago when I was at ServiceMaster, because there was no, lo and behold, this big monster franchise operation has no clear process to how to mitigate and how to document. So that's what I came up with. But so the documentation, if you have a reason behind everything you did, which is, not to plug the 24-hour tech too much, but that's what it's for, to give you a justification. I placed this air mover here because my moisture map says it was wet. Excuse me, it said it was wet. And my hygrometric readings say it's still wet on day 3. I'm still drying, blah, blah, blah. But none of that works if you don't have proper contracts in place. None of that works if you don't have an agreement with your client that they are ultimately the responsible party to pay your bill. The vast majority of problem cases I see, and I hear about it all the time, adjusters not wanting to pay. The vast majority of the problems are not in documentation. They're in an entitled insured who doesn't believe they're responsible for the bill.
And that's such a great topic, because something that I've mentioned tons and tons of time is weak salesmanship. And I believe that if there's an industry, and I'm probably going to get some horrible comments on this, but if there is an industry that has the weakest salespeople on the planet, welcome to the restoration industry.
Welcome.
And the reason for this, it's not their fault. It's genuinely not. But if you start your career off in let's call it a big box restoration company, right? First thing that they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and show you their AOB, their work order authorization, and all of this stuff. And then what they're really going to show you is how to smile and be a really, really nice guy and pretend that you're this great neighbor, that the only reason why you're in the restoration industry is because it has nothing to do with the money. It has nothing because you have bills to pay. It's only because you really want to serve your community. All you have to do, ma'am, is sign right here. We'll take care of the rest. So inevitably, it's a very soft sell, because you're not asking for a physical commitment. You're not asking for a monetary commitment.
Yeah.
You're asking for a signature. And again, locker room talk. It's like, hey, don't worry. If we don't get it from the insurance company, we won't come after you, right? Because that's basically what the selling process is. So in some shape, way, or form, the industry ourselves, we've created this issue, right? Where we're so concerned about getting the AOB that we forget that ultimately the homeowner is the one that's responsible. I mean, look at what's happening with deductibles. Let's just talk about deductibles for a second. Like, everybody is so scared to ask for the deductible. It's like, if you go to a doctor's office today, it being an insured patient, before you see the doctor, they're going to go ahead and take your input form, all of that stuff. And we're like, all right, great. Mr. McCabe, your deductible, according to your insurance, is $150 before you see the doctor, or, your copay, which is essentially, it's your deductible.
Or on your way out the door.
Right. Either way, you are paying your copay. Now, that is the equivalent of a deductible. But again, people don't even say, hey, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, I see here that you have a $2,500 deductible, which, by the way, that doesn't break the bank for anybody. Like, there's credit cards. No. You can go ahead and scrounge up $2,500, right? Mr. and Mrs.
Most people can.
Yeah. You can go ahead and, by the way, you're responsible for this $2,500 deductible. You do understand that, correct? So what happens is that because that conversation isn't being had up front, later on, after you've already done the project, after you've already gotten the contract signed, then you say, hey, Mr. Homeowner, by the way, did you remember that you have this $2,500 deductible? That's where all the issues come in.
100%. And what we're doing collectively is giving the insured a cop-out. We're giving them an excuse. And we're taking responsibility for things that we have no business taking responsibility for. And here's the biggest unspoken thing about collecting deductibles. you collect deductibles, and I'm talking more mitigation here than repairs, but repairs as well. Once that deductible is collected, that's consideration as part of a contract. That is incurred cost. That homeowner has incurred that cost. Now it turns that magical estimate that we don't write estimates for mitigation, but all of a sudden adjusters always treat them like estimates. Well, once that deductible is collected, that money, that consideration for that contract is in, that's an indemnification question now.
It changes the entire game.
It changes the entire conversation.
Absolutely. Yep.
And your client has skin in the game.
Yeah.
You know,
and also, here's the other big takeaway. And here's the other. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but here's the other big takeaway on this. Right? Think about the smaller restoration companies, right? Because I was, 5 years in the business. When I first started, I was a super small restoration company, right? So that $2,500 that you're collecting right there on the spot, that covers your nut. Like that helps you cover your nut.
That covers your costs for that job, right? Usually.
So there's first of all, it helps with cash flow issues. That's number one. But then number two, when the customer now has that legitimate skin in the game, right? Regardless of what their financial wherewithal is, what their net worth is, it doesn't matter. They've put $2,500, $3,000, $1,000, whatever their deductible is, that's out of pocket now. Come 30 days and they see that credit card statement, they're like, oh man, that's right. Now you've got an advocate in your corner too to be like, hey, by the way, Joe Schmo, the adjuster over there, is giving us a hard time. They're questioning this and that. You know, let's work together on this. It changes the entire game.
Yeah. It's even more powerful if they know what they're in for. If you provide, a lot of people don't. A lot of people, if you're out there, listen to these words I'm about to say really carefully. If you have as per insurance proceeds written into your contract, take that contract off your shelf and burn it. Don't do that. Because when we're relying on as per insurance proceeds, we're opening the door to letting the adjuster stick it to us. I'm trying to keep it PG here.
Okay. Let's not do that.
So don't open the door. You want to keep that. You want to keep any option or any doubt that your invoice is not an invoice out of play. So you need to schedule fees with your contract. Now you can't, if you're doing work and you're billing out of Xactimate, it's not like you can print out a list of 14,000 line items. Even the water category is 512 line items. You're not going to list out 512 line items. So that's where people get lazy again in their contracting is they just fall back to as per insurance proceeds or as per Xactimate, blah, blah, blah. You're taking control for your profitability out of your hands and giving it to somebody else with no incentive to better your position. So schedule of fees. Deductible, schedule of fees. And that schedule of fees, guess what, is either going to say, this is what I'm charging for this, your general equipment, air movers, dehues, blah, blah, blah. It needs to be 1 or 2 pages. It's either going to say at the bottom, this is a time and material, and we're going to mark it up 10 and 10, or we're going to mark it up 20, 20, 20. Or those prices already have a reasonable markup in them, and you don't ever show 10 and 10. You don't ever show the markup. But the insured, the person that signed that contract and paid you the deductible, can look at the equipment in their house. Oh, I've got 25 air movers in here and four dehues. Well, he said there's 175 a day for the dehues, and they can know what they're in for.
Right.
A lot of us play a game of gotcha, and too many of our clients are surprised when they get a bill for thousands of dollars.
Right.
Well, I didn't think it was going to be like that. Well, that's on us. That's on you as a salesperson. Going back to we are lazy salespeople because these are gimme jobs. Insurance jobs are not competitive bid, right? There's no requirement for 3 numbers, so we just get lazy,
right?
And we fall back on bad habits, and that laziness is why your AR is out in 120 days,
right? Yeah, and again, having a clean contract is so important. And also, I mean, like even in our contract, like we've gone as far as in our agreement for whatever it's worth to specifically go out of the way to say that our pricing is not reflective of national estimating software of any kind, and that we may or may not be in line with, market value. And again, I'm paraphrasing here.
Sure.
But, and again, for whatever that's worth, It's in my contract. And the reason why it's there is because it's like, well, we don't pay these, this is what the price is. Like, that's great. But in my agreement, it very specifically states that we don't work based off what your idea of pricing is. It's my business, it's my business. It's my client. We have a mutual client here. We've already done our part to prevent secondary damages or, to create a safe and suitable living condition. Now it's on you, So taking advantage of the contract and not having these simple boilerplate contracts, I think is really important.
Well, it makes you, as the contractor, it makes you commit. We are notoriously non-committal when we start relying on third parties to do our pricing for us. And I had a thought, and it was in and an out. It's gone. It's gone.
The thought's gone. The thought's gone.
It's gone.
Well, if you get it back, we'll circle back to it.
We'll circle back to it. It just comes down to, that's what it was. There is, and I've seen it, this misconception of all this boatloads of money in restoration. And the common theme, from adjusters is, there's plenty of money in it. You're making plenty of money. And I think a good portion of the restoration industry has bought into that idea, and they feel this level of guilt about charging more. They feel a level of guilt of, maybe I am making too much money. Maybe I am trying to charge too much. Maybe I am gouging. But at the end of the day, and I fight against that all the time. And I'm here to tell you, you can't charge enough for what we do. You can't charge enough for getting out of the middle of the night, crawling into a poop-filled crawl space, and sucking poo for hours. First off, you couldn't pay me to do that anymore. I've done it. I don't want to do it again. And my price is about $800 an hour if you want me to do it now.
Right.
So you don't. There is no need to feel any guilt, and there is no need to take an adjuster's word for it when they say there's plenty of money in it. I've probably put out 100 different memes on the subject of, show me where that profit is. If there's supervision built in to any one of these line items, show it to me. Because if Xactimate is good at one thing, they're good at granulation. Granulation. There's a new word for you. Write it down. Granulation. The data out of Xactware is so precise. It's so detailed. We know how many square foot of this room a painter can cover in an hour according to Xactimate, because we know the labor yields. We know the square footage yields. We know everything. But I don't know, where's this mystery overhead in this line item? Where's this mystery supervision? It doesn't exist. And so to have adjusters telling us what is included in any Xactware line item, when Xactware themselves say it's not included in any line item, is bogus. And we got to stop that. We got to stop the noise. And we got to stop. We got to fight. We got to push back and say, show me. If you really believe there's so much margin built into this and I don't need overhead and profit, show me exactly how much margin is in this job. I dare you. And it's crickets, right? Because they don't have an answer to that.
Right.
They don't have an answer. So anytime an adjuster says there's plenty of money in it, ask them to show you. Define your terms, Mr. Adjuster. How much money am I making on this job?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And again,
I can't answer it.
You've got Hyundai, right? And then you've got Rolls-Royce. Both of them will get you from point A to point B. They don't cost the same. They just simply do not cost the same, right? The cost of manufacturing, the cost of parts, the clout that comes along with it. Name whatever it is that you want that's justifying that price. There's no reason why someone else, another organization, can tell you that you cannot be the Rolls-Royce of your industry. There's no one out there that has that kind of power. And the industry pushing you to be the Hyundai, to be the Daewoo, right? Because that's the prices that they want to pay is beyond, first of all, it's unfair, right? It's unethical, right? And I mean, quite frankly, un-American. Like, let's just call it what it is. I've got the bull behind me. It
is.
The US of A, my friend.
They want caviar service and Cadillac feel for Daewoo pricing. And that's the unfairness, is that they expect a high level of service. The service level agreements that some of these guys sign are just nuts. And the overhead they have to take on just to service these programs is just stupid.
Which is interesting about programs.
Cadillac level stuff.
Right, exactly. Which is interesting about programs. When you're talking about particularly TPAs, and again, look, each business needs to find what works for them. I'm not against TPA work. We personally don't do TPA work. We have our reasons for that. It's not necessarily the game that we want to play today. Now, I may change my tune tomorrow, but as of right now, that's our position, right? So never say never. But here's the thing about TPAs. Who's benefiting from these from this administrator work? Because they're the insurance company, the insurance organization, they need to have an incentive, a financial incentive, a business incentive. There needs to be some metric that's being measured to say, you know what, program work makes sense. And generally what that means is that most vendors then are providing certain pricing at a certain scale, or they're willing to take certain discounts, or they're basically just saying, hey, this is what you get for this project, call it a day, bye-bye, off to the next one. We've got another 3 deals lined up for you, right? And then everybody's happy.
Right.
But that's considered an incentive, right? A financial incentive. Now, as the insured, right, as the homeowner, as the commercial property owner, that agreement that was made from my insurance carrier to their vendor, there's a profit margin there. There is a chunk of the pie that is currently missing. Who's getting that? Because in theory, if I'm paying the premiums, if there's any benefit throughout this entire process,
I should get it. Yeah.
I should be getting that.
The insured should get it.
Right. But no one's having that conversation, right? And I think that this is where a lot of independent, and I think that this is more of a message for guys like me, like the independent guys, right? When you realize that the insurance carriers are playing their own game, right? And they are finding ways, creative ways, innovative ways to increase their profitability. Case in point would be the TPA work. And they're making their arguments as to why they pay what they pay, which, by the way, also as a side note to this is also one of the major factors that is keeping Xactimate pricing down, right? Because if you get enough of these vendors that are not updating their price lists and you're not taking these surveys, et cetera, of course, it's never going to move the needle, right?
Yeah, it's going to stagnate.
Yeah. Yep. So as an independent, when you realize that the insurance company has these built-in bonuses, if you will, discounts, you as an independent going in, you have a very strong case and an argument from an ethical standpoint to say, my pricing is what my pricing is, not because I want to gouge the market. It's because I'm making sure that my customer is being, is getting the service that they should have gotten from you in the first place or from any other vendor.
Yep.
And that, again, going back to your mentality and then mechanics, that's part of the mentality, is when you have enough, faith in what it is that you're doing to say, this is legitimately why we're bringing forth this pricing, and here it is. But I think that just having those little tidbits of information in your head as a contractor, as a restoration, water mitigation guy, give you that additional boost of confidence to say, you know what, I can make this case, and here's why.
100%. Because at the end of the day, they are playing their own game, but they're playing it with your money. When a TPA gets involved, or you have to hire another admin or 3 to click the buttons in Contractor Connection, you are taking on administrative burden on behalf of the carrier. You are supporting the carrier with your own personnel and your own money. So that administrative burden still has to get done, right? That's TPA is there to administer the claim ostensibly. Theoretically, but the TPAs and the carriers are pushing all the administrative burden downhill, and the program guy has to pick that up. The program guy is carrying that load. So the programs, the clients, Contract Connection and Code Blue or whatever else, their clients are the carriers, but the contractors are paying for it, and we got to stop that. We just got to stop that.
That's exactly right. And on that note, let's just go ahead and take a moment to thank our sponsors. Photo documentation is possibly one of the most important aspects of what it is that we do in the restoration business. Not only so that the client knows exactly what's going on, but also so that you can prove your work to insurance companies. One of the best ways that I found to go ahead and document our projects is by using Company Cam. Company Cam is an amazing app. It has so many features, everything from time-stamped and GPS located photos, individual project files, unlimited photo storage, in-app communication with your crew, a live stream of all of your projects as the photos are coming in, as if it was an Instagram feed. So from a managerial standpoint, Company Cam can help you there as well. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to protect your organization while documenting and keeping everything nice and neat. So we've got a really special offer for you. If you go to companycam.com/dominate, not only will you get your 14-day free trial, but you're also going to get the first 2 months 50% off. So again, head on over to companycam.com/dominate, get the app, and I'm sure you're going to love it. All right. So we are back. And all right. So so we've talked a lot about, the game, right? But now let's get down into the, what I think is should be mentioned, right? Because again, it always sounds like when we're talking about getting paid, like we're the big bad wolf and we want to gouge the market and we want to do this and we want to do that. And it's easy to make that case, right? And I think it's because a lot of the contractors out there, myself included, on several cases, we just get frustrated, right? We're like, hey, we already rendered this service. We have a hard physical cost. We've paid for labor. We've paid for material. We've serviced this client. Costs are going up exponentially. Fuel cost is going up, but wood cost is going up. Like everything is going up, right? So it's easy for a person looking from the outside in saying these guys just want to gouge the market, right? But that's not really what we're talking about here, right? And I think that a lot of people in the restoration industries, even some of the contractors, we get it confused and we're like, oh, all I'm looking to do is to pull a fast one on the insurance company, right? To how can I get paid for the stuff that I didn't do and try to get even, right? But like we were talking off camera, like, having the ethics to go along with your invoice, I think is extremely important, right? So what's your take on that? And what, how do you, as a contractor who, probably has that belief that, hey, I got to try to squeeze as much quote unquote fluff into my invoice. How do you change that mindset and to say, no, don't do that. Don't play that game. And this is the new way of looking at it, and this is how you'll get paid faster. What's your take on that?
Well, I would assert through my experience and my interactions on a day-to-day basis. Yesterday, I had a client of mine say, "Hey, I'm having trouble getting this bill paid, and they want my hydrometrics." I didn't do them, but here's my hydrometric sheet anyway, and he plugged numbers in, because he thought that was the best way for him to get paid, is to make up moisture readings to give to an insurance carrier. And I'm not even going to say what state is in, because this guy could get real in trouble with that. That is insurance fraud. You are presenting fake information in order to get compensated for it's stupid. But in my experience, the people that are most compelled to play that sort of game don't have a real understanding of their own costs and profit structure. They don't do job costing for the most part. They don't understand for every revenue dollar how much they're paying out for overhead and labor and everything else. So they feel like they have to get everything because they think they're not making enough money, so they got to make more money. And I would shift that and say, let's show you how to make plenty of money for your company by doing the right thing. Let's look at your invoicing practices. Let's look at your documentation practices, because I guarantee you there's enough money in it doing legitimate things. You don't ever have to make anything up. You don't ever have to add fluff. But if you don't have an understanding of if you don't have an understanding of your own books, you're always going to be like, oh, I'm not charging enough, or I'm not getting enough. Multiple times this year, on large losses. I traveled through a couple large losses this year for on behalf of clients, and we came up with some really big invoices, like $350,000 mitigation dry downs. And there was some fight, and I had to have a conversation with my client. Say, the insurance company, this is $350. Insurance company paid $175. Well, what do you have into it? And one of them was like, oh, I have this, here's my number. Okay. And I was able to go, okay, you've got $150 into this job. Well, we can easily justify, just based on your cost structure, we can justify a $300. Easy. The other guy had no idea what he had into the job.
Right.
So it was hard for me to say, this is how hard we're going to fight. This is how long we're going to fight for that money, because he didn't understand how much money he had into it. If you put together, there's a certain point on every single job, especially the bigger they get, where you've made the money. Yes, you could easily justify more money, right? You could charge for 7 days, right? Instead of giving a weekly rate on your equipment if it ran for 2 weeks. There are concessions you can make. Once you understand you've made the money, you've covered your nut, you've made the profit you need, you can make concessions back, and you don't have to fight that thing for another year. That's the trade-off you have to play as a business owner. What is this additional money worth?
Right.
What's that delta between the $175 that they paid and the $300 that I invoiced for? What is that delta worth to me?
Exactly.
How much of that money do I actually need? And it pains me to say it, but sometimes it makes sense to take less than your invoice.
Right.
Just to get it out, get it done. I'm never an advocate of losing money. You should never, ever, ever lose money on a job, especially when insurance is involved. Because at the end of the day, insurance will pay what they owe if you make them, if you push them. They don't want to. But the other side of that coin is insurance companies never pay more than they owe.
Right.
They never do.
Exactly.
So if you fight that $175 payment because you need $250 out of it, and you get $250 a year later, they knew they owed the $250 up front. They knew, we go back to the square footage pricing that I'm trying to work up here. Insurance carriers understand. They could do the data. They could do the math real quick and say, across the board, all the mitigation jobs, $10,000 and under, they know what that number is per square foot. They could do it by the house. This insured house was this many square foot on average, and this is our average mitigation loss. They know what that number is.
Right.
I'm guessing it's $25 a foot. So the insurance company knows what they owe. They know it better than we do. But it's on us to prove to them and prove to our client that they owe it.
And have the conversation to the client that ultimately you're responsible,
exactly.
right? And this is where it comes down to, and I constantly preach like SOPs and having, getting familiar with your numbers, because these are just universal truths, right? Having a SOP or, making it company practice to get people comfortable with having the conversation with the client and saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, ultimately, I want you to understand that you're signing this document and ultimately you are responsible. Let's just call it what it is. This is your home. Do you agree with me? Well, yeah, Rico, of course this is our home. Okay. So you understand that even though you have insurance, that the insurance is a business and that this thing could drag out for 30, 60, 90, 120 days. It could be a year, right? You understand that? Yes, of course, Rico, I do understand it. And if in the event that you didn't have insurance, you would still have to go out of pocket for this. You do understand that, right, Mr. and Mrs. Client? Well, yeah, Rico, exactly. Well, great. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to collect the deductible. That's step number one. Step number two, here is my agreement, step by step. This is essentially what we charge. Here's my price list. We're going to submit this, and we're going to document this 7 ways from Sunday, and we're going to submit a true and honest estimate or invoice to the insurance company, and with the goal of getting paid in full, period. Yep. Frankly, I don't think anybody can say that that is a difficult conversation.
It's not. It's an honest conversation. It's only difficult when you have bad intent from the get. It's only difficult when you know in your heart of hearts you're going to try to get something that you haven't earned.
Right.
And you're going to start playing some game with the insurance adjuster, and you want the homeowner needs to be a part of that game you're going to play. That's the only time it's hard. But honesty, 100%. There's a spot, I forget which, there's 20 steps in the 24-hour tech checklist. One of those steps early on, I want to say step 5 or 6, is right after you develop your drawing strategy and your demo strategy, you go to the homeowner and tell them what you intend to do. Hey, I'm going to tear out all this drywall. I'm going to tear out this carpet. I'm going to put this much equipment. Does that sound reasonable to you? You already got their buy-in because they signed the contract, they gave you the deductible, but now you get further buy-in that this is the job that needs to get done. And then at the end of the day, when that invoice hits the adjuster's desk and the adjuster calls the homeowner, oh, these guys are gouging, these guys are, charging way too much money. The homeowner can say, well, their equipment was here. They did. I'm reading the invoice here, and it's very easy to read. They took out 25 square foot of drywall, and it's right here. They told me what they were going to charge me, and they charged me. We need to be in a position, back to salesmanship and contracting, we have to be in a position to foretell the future. We're going to fortune tell to our homeowner, to our insured, to our business owner, these are the things that are going to happen. And better yet, here's the things that the adjuster is probably going to say.
Right. And we should know most of this.
I've got a great checklist.
Based on experience.
We need to
alone,
link
right?
up the power. Remind me the power questions. Remind me to send you a link to the power questions. They're out there for free. I just forget the link. There's a list of power questions that you can hand to your insured to really nail the adjuster and put them in their place. And their place is to pay the freaking claim.
And we'll put a link to the power questions in the show notes, as well as the video description below. But before we move on, what's the site where our listeners and our viewers can go ahead and get the course, the 24-hour tech course? Where is it that they can get that at?
waterdamageprofit.com.
waterdamageprofit.com. That also, check it out if you're interested in that. It's beyond fairly priced, in my opinion, which is what right now it's at only $250. So it's good. It's a drop in the bucket for giving you the ammunition that you need. It's going to be in the video description below, as well as in the show notes. So if you want to check that out, just head on over to that site. Go ahead and pick it up. And that's got tons of questions. And what can people expect inside of that course?
Well, it's WRT, ASD. You pay all these thousands of dollars to send your technicians, right, to get certified and blah blah. And you get a fancy certification that you put in a drawer in it, whatever else. Right. So they teach you how to dry a structure, theoretically. While experience teaches you way more than that. But they don't teach you how to get paid to dry a structure, and that's where the 24-hour tech comes in. Right. The 24-hour tech ensures that your technician is properly trained, not only to document, but to document in a way that your invoice is justifiable and defensible. Beautiful. So yeah, that's what a lot of my clients get. They put all before their technician, either right before or right after they get out of WRT, they take a 24-hour tech, because I've been through a WRT about 4 times at this point, because I never kept up my continuing ed, and I worked for another company. They required me to be current, so I had to go back to WRT. I could probably teach WRT at this point, but not one of those times I took WRT did I learn how to properly invoice for a job. I didn't learn how to interact with a client. I learned the science of drawing, but that was it. So you need something, if it's not the 24-hour tech, you need something else to take your technicians to the competency level to do the do every day. And learning how to run a protometer is one step, but it's not the final step.
Right, exactly. Now, part of what you do is you also provide estimates, right? You write up estimates for other pros. So typically, what does that process look like? I mean, is it just when people are backed up? Is it, smaller organizations, larger organizations? Is there a threshold of amount of business that an organization needs to have in order to work for you? Or is it just one of these added values where it's like, hey, you know what? I don't want to write my own estimates. This guy really knows what he's doing. He's been around the block. Let me just go ahead and have a pro write my estimates. So what does that process looks like if any of our viewers or listeners just say, you know what, I like where this guy's coming from, knows what he's talking about, and if a well-written estimate is probably going to get me paid faster, why not? What does that process typically look like?
It will, yeah. A well-written estimate, you can tell. Especially, I mean, Rico, you could probably look at an invoice or an estimate and go, this was written by a dumbass, or this guy knows what he's doing. You can, the ability to communicate non-verbally through an Xactimate estimate is underrated. People don't understand, and it goes beyond an opening statement, in F9 notes. It's how it's structured together. So, and let me tell you, things are changing quick. Things are changing real quick. Look at Hover and Matterport. And I'm going to answer your question here by a roundabout way. But right now, did you know that there's an integration, a direct integration from Matterport to Xactware? So just like an Eagle View, you go into Sketch and you download the Eagle View measurements. Mm-hmm. Now you can download the dimensions and Sketch directly from Matterport right into your Xactimate.
Right.
Hover.to has a service that I pay $350 a month for. That's another subscription. You and I have the same subscription addiction. Yeah. It just adds up. But I can send a link to a homeowner or a contractor anywhere in the world, ostensibly, but I only work in the United States generally, and they can use their smartphone, take 8 to 10 pictures on the exterior of their house, and I automatically get an ESX file, picture-perfect sketch for the roof and the siding with the openings and everything. So when you talk about what I do as claims delegates estimate writing, it's remote estimating. So the better the data I have, the better estimate I can write, right? And it's not just me, it's me and 5 others that are doing this right now. So what I want to do is bring each one of my clients up to the highest standard of care, the highest technological level we have. And if they don't have to hire a project manager to go out with a laser tape and a piece of paper and measure anything anymore, they don't have to get up on a roof and run a tape or anything like that. If I can give them 2 tools through Matterport and Hover to get me a beautiful rendering of the property, that is 90% of the work when it comes to Xactimate. Xactimate is a graphical estimating program. If you don't have the dimensions to put into that graphical estimating program, your estimate's always going to be shit. So the better data, the better estimate. So I share my Matterport account, sort of, with my clients. They just got to go buy a camera. You don't have to buy a big camera. You can buy the 360 camera, the X1, the Rico Theta X1, or Z1, I'm sorry. Z1 is the one I would get. So with a smartphone and a Z1 camera, they can get beautiful renderings to me, directly to my Xactimate, without having somebody on staff that understands how to do these things.
Right.
And that's what it comes down to, is I am a replacement for that magical unicorn of a person who is a project manager estimator who can do all this Xactimate stuff. That person is going to cost you 8 to 9% of your overall revenue that they generate every year. We are sub 2%.
Right.
And really sub 1%. So where claims delegates, our perfect client is smaller. We tend to gravitate towards the smaller folks who are just getting into it because we eliminate the learning curve for Xactimate. We eliminate the learning curve for scoping because I can physically walk that property, virtually walk that property myself, and I can do my own takeoff. I like my clients to tell me a story of the loss, but if there's a Matterport involved, I just ship that off to my estimate writers, and they walk that property, and they're writing that scope, and then they're writing that estimate. So that's what it looks like. We got to get as much information as we can. Back in the day, 2012, 2013, I was getting a lot of just snapped pictures piled in an email, and then maybe a sketch written on a napkin. But that's what we do. We work with what we have. But now we get things out so much faster than I would argue most people could do it in-house. It just makes sense. Have someone else do it. Have someone do this that does it all day, every day. They're not changing hats. There's no inefficiencies between, now I'm managing a project, or now I'm, going out and selling a job, and now I'm estimating. There's so much inefficiency built into trying to put so many hats on one person. it just makes sense. That's where remote estimating is where the industry is going. There's a lot of players out there. There's a whole lot more players today than there were in 2012 when I started.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it just makes business sense. Now, once you get so big, it makes more sense to have that ability in-house. But we still have some bigger clients in the $10 million range that they get busy. Or, a lot of them they just say, you know what, we're going to write all our rebuilds, but all the mitigation, we're going to shove off to claims delegates because we spend about an hour, maybe 45 minutes on, we're generating $5,000 in 45 minutes and it's cost them $75.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, it makes sense. And just also just to have the availability, in your back pocket is big, because again, whether you're a small organization, a large organization, there's limited amounts of time, right? There's just these sprints where everybody's full hands, all hands on deck. You know that you got to get stuff done, and you don't have the 30 minutes to go ahead and write an estimate. Hey, look, go out there with your, Z1, do the sketch, send it off. And it's almost like because again, with these Matterports and, these 360 cameras, and I'm telling you, it's going to happen. And I'm probably a little bit ahead of my time here, but the whole metaverse is going to be the meeting places for adjusters and 100%. Estimators, and this is all of this debate is going to be purely academic. It was going to be like, man, can you believe back in the day we used to have to look at a computer screen? And like we're going to be able to eventually walk these job sites after the fact with the damage in a very augmented reality type of scenario, right? But anyways, that's a totally different tangent. But getting used to this technology now, and it's still amazing to me, how many people are not using this type of technology that's readily available, that saves you, it makes you money. Not only does it save you time, but it also makes you money on the back end. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, they wanted to, hire you for your services, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Email is perfect. Andy@claimsdelegates.com.
Andy?
Email would be great. Andy, ANDY.com. Yeah, we're going to get leapfrogged. I'm fully aware that I'm a dinosaur right now, because with AI as it is, we're not too far away from a computer looking at a Matterport and saying, "Oh, that's baseboard, that's drywall, that's carpet." We're close. I interviewed a guy. I can forget the name of the company. But that's what he's working on. He's working on taking 360s and these 3D walkthroughs and building a structural scope using a computer with no human input. But that's just fair warning that it's not about the tech. It's about the person. It's about the relationship you build with your client. It's about the relationship you build and the culture you'll build in your business. Because at the end of the day, the computer is probably going to do all of it, except for shaking that hand, giving that smile, and signing that contract.
Exactly right. Right. Having that human element.
Yeah, but it's the human element.
Exactly. Well, Andy, man, thank you so much, brother, for jumping on the show today. We appreciate all of your input. If you guys are not following him, make sure that you do. If you're not part of the Restoration Rebels group, make sure that you jump in there, the Facebook group. Andy goes ham every once in a while in the group. A little bit. Also, make sure that you hit him up on LinkedIn. I'll go ahead and I'll leave a link to his personal LinkedIn page in the video description and in the show notes. And Andy, man, thank you again so much for jumping on, man. This was tons of fun.
It was cool. It was good to see you. And we'll stay in touch.
Let's do it again.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, interviewing the restoration business's top industry insiders, the movers and shakers, the hustlers and hackers. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Instagram. Find Rico at Rico Garcia Jr. And check out the YouTube channel at Restoration Domination. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.